So next up, we are going to move on to clinical trials and medical research. And we have two experts with us this evening who are going to help us with this topic. The first is Dr. Wendy Barrington. She is an associate professor in the School of Nursing and adjunct associate professor in the School of Public Health at the University of Washington. She is a population health researcher and instructor of healthcare practitioners. In both these roles, Dr. Barrington strives to understand how the conditions in which people live, work, and age affect health and to promote health equity action. She engages communities to address their health priorities and works to transform health systems to address racial disparities and clinical outcomes. Welcome, Dr. Wendy Barrington.
Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Jasmine. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And then our second expert who's going to help us on this topic as well is Dr. Kemi M.H. She is a gynecologic oncologist, also at the University of Washington. She specializes in the surgical and medical treatment of uterine, ovarian, cervical, and vulvar cancers. Dr. Dahl's clinical interests include surgery, chemotherapy, and hormonal therapy for gynecological cancers and minimally invasive and robotic surgery. Dr. Dahl is honored to be a part of a patient's cancer care team. She believes every patient deserves honesty, respect, and compassion, and she brings those values to work with her every day. Thank you, Dr. Dahl, for joining us this evening as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So
we will get to call you Dr. Dahl.
Say that again.
People really get to call you Dr. Dahl.
Yeah, I have to burst your bubble. It's actually Dahl, like roll.
Dahl.
Don't care. They're like, we don't care. We're calling you Dr. Dahl.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna call you Dr. Dahl too, if that's okay.
That's fine.
So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I know that clinical trials and medical research is kind of a taboo topic, especially within our community, but we are going to jump right in and hopefully get some of these questions answered. So I'm just gonna throw the questions out there and then either one of you or both of you at the same time can go ahead and answer them for us. So the first one that we have is, do you have to have metastatic breast cancer to participate in a clinical trial?
So I'm happy to lead off on that. The answer is absolutely not. There are many different trials that are investigating new treatments and relationships between factors that might have to do with survivorship or just the experience of having that condition or not having that condition and making those comparisons. And the goal of these clinical studies is to increase our knowledge about diseases and to develop safer, more effective treatments in the fight against them. And I'm going to specifically talk more about cancer. You know, we recognize that it's a complex condition, that there are clinical trials that look at many aspects and many different phases of cancer, and that these trials are not just for patients in the final stages or even in active treatment. There can also be trials that are looking, as I said, at survivorship as well.
Dr. Dahl, did you want to add anything on that as well?
Just that I totally agree. I think that if for almost any given condition, and definitely breast cancer, there are going to be trials at every stage of where a woman might be. And I think Dr. Barrington really hit on it when she stated that, you know, clinical trials aren't the last resort in any way, shape, or form. So whether you have metastatic breast cancer or a very early stage breast cancer, even a stage 0, there may very well be clinical trials that are available. And some of them have to do with differing the kinds of treatment that you receive, but some of them have to do with other things that we also care about, like thinking about what kind of nausea medications work best, or thinking about what kind of outside support or exercise regimen or mindfulness things work well during treatment. So there's really, at this point, you know, we're really trying to study women very holistically to understand how we can help them thrive. And so wherever you are in a cancer journey, there is likely a trial somewhere out there that you could qualify for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And one way to kind of start to explore that is the National Cancer Institute, or the NCI. It's one of the many institutes under the National Institutes of Health. And they actually fund 71 cancer centers located in 36 states across the nation. And you can visit the websites of these centers to find clinical trials that they're actively recruiting for and needing patients to participate. And there might be, a clinical coordinating center for a trial, might be in a particular city, but they actually might be enrolling patients from a larger area than just around that particular city. The Fred Hutch, for example, which is where I'm sitting right now and where I'm an affiliate investigator, they're part of a comprehensive cancer center located in Seattle, and you can visit its website, and there's actually a link that you can click that will take you to a searchable web page of clinical trials that are actively recruiting. And you can actually input keywords to find the specific type of trial that you think would be right for you. So you can actually search, I'm really interested in breast cancer clinical trials, or I'm really interested in colorectal cancer clinical trials. Also, it's important to kind of think about that clinical trials can be categorized depending on the type of question that they're trying to answer. So Dr. Dahl, she was talking about there's many different aspects of the experience that we're trying to understand, whether it be treatment or whether it be quality of life, even prevention. Like, we are recruiting individuals who don't have cancer because we want to understand what are factors that contribute to increased risk of cancer, for example. And that there are also different phases of clinical studies. And that's really based on, at what point either the treatment is in its development and testing, or, other types of interventions, like Dr. Dahl mentioned, like, if we want to do lifestyle modification or changes to behaviors to see if that's going to be impactful on the experience. And, the sequence of studies, depending on kind of the amount of testing that it's undergone, can kind of start from, early phase 1 through phase 1 through phase 4. And so it's also important to kind of understand what type of clinical trial it is, because it will have an impact on what kinds of questions are trying to be answered.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't realize there are breast cancer clinical trials that you don't have to have had breast cancer to participate in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one category is like families. So people who have relatives who've had breast cancer, and trying to understand familial linkages and things like that. Like, there sometimes, if caregivers wonder, what can I do, or this happened to my sister, or things like that. And sometimes our ability to be able to study families, or who have that kind of link, to understand better, why some women get these cancers and some women don't, is like another example of not having cancer, but being able to really participate and contribute to how we understand what's going on. Yeah.
Okay. So what if someone is no longer in active treatment? Are there opportunities for them to participate in medical research, or once they're done, are they just completely done?
Oh my gosh, there are definitely opportunities. Because, after, you ladies know, right? After being in active treatment, you go into surveillance, right? And why? Because we're checking to make sure the cancer doesn't come back, right? So there's a whole category of trials that are looking at different ways that we can minimize the chance that cancer comes back. And so they're similar to what Dr. Barrington said. There are studies out there that are specifically looking to enroll women who are not active treatment anymore, to try to think about whether it's a medication intervention, whether it's a lifestyle, a behavioral intervention, anything like that, to try to understand, well, what can we do to try to prevent this cancer from coming back, for example. Another way that women who are no longer in active treatment might be on a trial might be just about their own health and well-being. So, again, we've been trying to take a much more holistic view of cancer in general. And so one of the things that we have noticed as a field is, cancer is it can be a life-changing experience, right? Absolutely. And sometimes not in a positive way. And what are the kind of things that we can put into place after treatment that can allow women to return back or move to a new quality quality of life and be able to enjoy their life to their fullest. And so there are a lot of trials out there in the world of what we call survivorship. I know some people like that term, some people don't, but really trying to understand how do we really take care of the whole woman after treatment is done. So yeah, and as Dr. Barrington said, a lot of those you'll find at comprehensive cancer centers or NCI centers that are doing that kind of work.
Okay.
And I think also it's important to note that one of the things that I feel strongly about is not just looking at holistic treatment afterwards, but doctors taking that approach during active treatment, looking holistically at a patient, having an understanding of their social and economic status and how that may play into whether someone's able to stick to their regimen or make it to appointments or not. With compliance. Sometimes compliance isn't just people that don't want to follow the rules. Sometimes there are barriers in place, and communities of color really are heavily impacted by that. So holistic view of patients, I think, is important throughout the entire process.
Oh, absolutely. You preach to the choir.
What kinds of things are being researched in clinical trials for women affected by breast cancer?
Right now, there are actually 34 active clinical trials related to breast cancer that are ongoing at the Fred Hutch. And as I mentioned, and as Dr. Dahl mentioned, there's other comprehensive cancer centers who also have their lists of clinical trials that are ongoing. But just to kind of give you a flavor of some of the things that are coming down the pike here at the Fred Hutch, there's 2 phase 1 trials to test vaccine among individuals with specific breast cancer subtypes. To see if it helps kill tumor cells that have been found to be resistant to chemo. There's a phase 3 trial to test the effectiveness of different radiation treatments among women with non-metastatic breast cancer. There's a phase 2 trial to test the endocrine response to different treatments among women with invasive lobular breast cancer. And so that's just 4 that I've kind of described. There's also another one I like the sound. It's called Understanding and Predicting Breast Cancer Events After Treatment, and it's called UPBEAT. So the kind of fun thing about studies is finding these acronyms to kind of fit the description as well. But that just kind of gives you an idea of some of the studies that are actually actively recruiting right now at the Fred Hutch and at the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, which is our affiliate cancer treatment center. Yeah.
Okay.
So CJ, she's one of our viewers, one of our metastatic baddies. She said that she actually attempted to do a clinical trial, and it was about liquid biopsies. Do you know if they're doing any more testing around that? She said it was great to participate in, but it wasn't very accurate.
I actually don't know, but I could look into that. I can definitely take a look and see what if that's a type of study that's actually currently being conducted right now at the Fred Hutch.
Yeah, and I also want to add, since we were talking about specific cancer centers, is that a lot of cancer centers now really have been mandated to be able to be more available to the community and to outside community facilities. So the Fred Hutch or the SCCA, but other cancer centers, they will have affiliate centers that aren't necessarily at the main hub, where you can still enroll in a clinical trial, though, because they've created a network to be able to reach communities that might not necessarily be at the main cancer center. So if anybody's out there and interested in trials, but for example, that you're like the big cancer center where you are is like 100 miles away or something like that, it's not close, that doesn't actually mean that you can't get on a trial. You can still go to these websites that we mentioned, look for one, and then you can find out if there's a clinic near you that's affiliated, because often they'll still be enrolling patients in the trials. And I think that's especially important for our community to understand.
Right. And a lot of those trials too are definitely, you don't necessarily have to go into the cancer center or the academic center to participate in them. A lot of them are done completely online. You may just have to do a survey. Yep. For example, I'm a part of a clinical trial right now, and that's just taking a look to see how after women have completed breast cancer treatment, how fatigue affects them and how they can get back into exercise. And I literally don't have to do anything but sit in front of my computer once every 2 weeks and talk to my mentor, and then just make sure I get up and go exercise so they can track it. But, you know, that's it. So those are like easy things for people to do. And like we were talking about before, and like Jasmine had said, like one of the barriers is some people don't have the resources to get up and go to the cancer center. You know, it's like, am I going to take off an hour from work to go do that and spend the money, or am I going to stay here at work?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I certainly think that the burden is on cancer centers and on us as researchers to make our trials accessible for anybody, right? Not just a particular type of person. I think that certainly things are shifting in that direction. We have a lot more room to go, but that there are more and more web-based signups, telemedicine type things to try to be able to have everybody can have access to trials. And like you said, trials of all different kinds. Because oftentimes patients will come in and they'll ask me questions. They're like, well, what does this mean for my fatigue? Or what does this mean for this? And I can't answer them yet. And it's these trials that we need to do so that we can be able to answer those questions in the future.
Right. So go ahead, Jasmine.
I have a question for you, Marissa. Yeah. So did you have any initial reservations about participating in clinical trials? Did you come to it with any background myths or misconceptions, rather?
I did at first. I was offered a clinical trial when I was first diagnosed, and I turned that down immediately, which I get. Like, you know, I'm just like, I want to get this cancer out of me. I don't want to have to sit here and wait to see if this drug is going to work. So I completely did, and just, you know, like how we can all talk about, we've all heard, you know, especially in our communities, what have been done to us, you know, many years. I mean, really, it wasn't really that long ago, but exactly, you know. So yeah, I was just like, okay, well, I don't want to be a guinea pig. But then learning more about it, and just hearing about research, and then doing some of the advocacy programs that we've been doing, it's like, okay, not clinical research or, you know, medical trials, they don't always have to involve medicine. They literally don't. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you have to do. And I think we have to get out of that mind frame of thinking that, because we always think that it's like, hey, if I'm going to be in a clinical trial, that must mean that they're going to give me some type of medicine. I don't know what that's going to be, where that's not necessarily the case. It's pretty much 50-50. Either you're going to be on a clinical trial where it's going to be drugs, or the second one's either going to be, you know, a survey and they're just surveilling you. So I did have a little bit of reservations at first, but now I'm just like, okay, I see one that's coming. Let me see if I can sign up if I'm a part of it. And, you know, and that's why I try to get out the information to other women too. Like, come on, let's participate, because we need more people of color to be in these. So when they research us, they know exactly how it's affecting us.
So one of the ways you overcame that barrier was kind of being proactive and immersing yourself in the education and understanding how clinical trials work.
Correct. And, you know, there is a lot of reading that you have to do. And sometimes it's really just a process of elimination, because they're looking for certain people to participate in them. But just reading about it, definitely asking a lot of questions. Always ask any type of questions that you may have, just to see if it works for you. And, you know, just be honest with whatever your concerns and your questions are.
So Keisha just asked the $1 million question. You guys see what this question is? Keisha asks, do you still receive needed treatment during the trial so your condition doesn't worsen? Can you guys explain what really happens in clinical trials in terms of treatment?
Yeah, well, do you want to go? I can go. Okay, so yeah, Keisha, I'm so glad you asked this question, because it's so important. So this is what I want. So first of all, there are all different kinds of trials. There are some trials where everybody's getting the same thing and they're just measuring what's happening. There are some trials where we're comparing two different treatments. And for the purpose of Keisha's question, I'm going to talk about treatment, because that's what we're not really, that's kind of where the thought is, the worry, right? Is I'm not going to get what I need. So what every single trial is doing is it's trying to do better than what we currently have available. So when we're talking about treatment trials for cancer, if you think about it, every single treatment that exists right now, that's part of cancer treatment, it once was in a trial. And what happens is when we figure out a new medication that we find and we say, oh, we think this actually works. We think this is working in cancer. We're testing it in the lab. We found that it's working really well in all of these different kinds of patients. Maybe this is going to work in breast cancer patients. What happens is you then have to say, okay, I now recognize that we have a standard of care that's good, but in our preliminary data, it actually looks like this drug is even better. So when you're on a trial, you are either getting what we know is working or what is better. That's what a trial means. And so it's possible that you will get exactly what we know is working, which means you're not losing out. You're getting exactly what you would have gotten anyway, or you're getting something that might be shown to be better. And so I think it's definitely something that is like a little bit different to wrap our minds around. But oftentimes, like the drugs and the trials that were happening 3 years ago that I was able to enroll my patients on, they wouldn't have been able to have those medications if they weren't on trial. And 3 years later, now those medications are available to everybody, right? But I had women who were able to access it 3 years ago before you could get it anywhere because they were on a trial. So I hope that was clear, but it's a really important question. And I also just want to add, if there's ever a question like that, you should be able to get very clear answers from your doctor about exactly what the medication is on the trial. If there's a comparison, what's the other comparison, and these kinds of things in order to get comfortable signing up. That's absolutely required.
Mm-hmm. And you know, one thing that I just thought about, and Dr. Barrington, I think this might have been one of the topics that you wrote to when we did our like clinical trials and meds, is at first it almost seems like why would people think that? But if you think about history and you think about the Tuskegee experience, that's exactly what happened.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was going to say that's a very, very valid concern.
Absolutely.
It's a very valid concern because, you know, even quoting the Tuskegee, I mean, that happened back, you know, from, you know, the early 30s through that study ended, I believe, like close to 1970. Mm-hmm. But there's still things that are happening.
Absolutely.
And that we need to be aware of. And I think more and more, you know, as investigators of color are becoming the researchers and are mindful of these concerns, we need not only representation in our participants, but we need representation among people who are asking these questions and who are designing these studies and who are analyzing the data and talking about its implications. So, I mean, it's real because, and it's very valid. And I can, you know, I think we all can agree that there's a reason why people have those concerns and those are very valid.
Right.
They're also important. Like I wouldn't want anybody to sign up for a trial without asking these kinds of questions. Mm-hmm. Very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So research has shown that African American and Latina women tend to have higher rates of triple negative breast cancer, which is associated with worse outcomes. So I know we've talked about this already, but, you know, Dr. Barrington and, you know, Dr. Dahl, I think you could kind of piggyback on this as well. So why is it important to have diversity in, you know, clinical trials?
Absolutely. Well, just to kind of say again, just to reiterate, you know, if women who are experiencing these outcomes are not in trials and there's no way to understand that experience and to understand how to treat and how to promote the quality of life among individuals who are having that experience. And so I think that's kind of the first thing that pops into my head is, you know, most of the clinical trial data that we have are completely generalizable, meaning that these findings have come from participants who are mostly white. Mm-hmm. And so we recognize that people in this country have had different experiences and that those experiences actually have physiologic consequences. They impact our health. And so it means also that people of different experiences are not only going to be having different outcomes, but could potentially have different responses to treatment for those outcomes. Exactly. So it's really important that we have representation so we can ask the questions and understand and describe the experience really accurately. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I had, what's funny is I actually sat on a review board yesterday reviewing clinical trials, and there was 2 trials that came up, and one of them, there was over 900 participants, and over 800 of them were Caucasian, and then about 40 of them were African American and 40 of them were Hispanic. And I'm just like, what is this? Like, it doesn't even reflect, you know, what's going on and what we should be studying here. Like, why is this? And it's on both ends of the spectrum, right? It's like, it's not even that it is just like the clinicians that need to get out and get more ethnicities to be participating in it, but we also need to have knowledge within our community that yes, we need to be more proactive and be involved into these studies. So then that way they can be studying all of us and not just a small percentage of the population.
And you know what's interesting? Marissa and I had the honor of being part of the first GRASP participants at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium. And it basically gave us an opportunity to do the poster tour with a clinician and then also with a more advanced advocate and to talk to researchers. And you would be surprised how many studies were happening that they didn't even think to include race to look at how they were analyzing. And one of the places that I found to be probably one of the most interesting is how they are using specialized nurse navigators for women that have metastatic breast cancer. But they call people in, you have to come in for an hour to do this, and then you sit down. It's a really long time. And I said, okay, so how many people were Black? Oh, well, I don't really know. How many people of color in general do you have? Oh, well, we didn't really look at that. But you need to look at that, because if you look at the research that's already been done about communities of color and access to quality health care for women in particular, when you're looking at breast cancer, African American women state focusing on survival needs as one of the reasons they are delayed in going to the doctor. So when you're saying that everyone is having this great experience, everyone is loving this, but you haven't really included people that are going to encounter barriers to actually getting to that appointment or barriers just to get to the referrals, it doesn't seem very holistic in that approach.
You're speaking to something that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm very, very interested in really understanding how health systems can work in partnership with community health workers or navigators or members of communities who are really passionate and advocating for health and want to be able to help promote the health of their communities. Sorry. In order to have the lights come back on. And, having an individual who shares your experience and can understand the types of barriers that you're experiencing and that you feel comfortable and trust to be able to talk about those things is so incredibly important. And at the same time, I've been really thinking very hard about that model because, the health system may not necessarily provide sufficient resources and support for those individuals to truly help navigate communities of color. And so that's where my research and where my interest is going is how can I promote changes within systems to be able to seriously support community members who are doing that kind of work, because I think it's so incredibly important.
Well, I would love to talk to you more about that offline, because I had so many aha moments walking around. Marissa and I, when we decided to do For the Breast of Us, one of the first things we did before we did anything else was pull research. And so having the opportunity to go to GRASP and to see where researchers' heads were and the kind of solutions that they were thinking of, I also had the opportunity to talk to them and to put some bugs in their ear about how some of these solutions needed to be customized specifically for the communities that are facing the worst health disparities. So.
I would love to.
I'm just going to say amen, amen, amen. I won't go on my rant about endometrial cancer, but yes, amen. All of that.
We did get a viewer question in from Natalia, and she states, why are my docs not discussing clinical trials more often? They direct me to websites about clinical trials, but normally don't seem to know any offhand.
And Natalia is actually one of our metastatic baddies for some context.
Hi, Natalia. I think I'm going to grab that one as a clinician. So the way that clinical trials work is there'll be a team, and often this will be a team of researchers and clinicians, and maybe only a few of them that are really leading and really know all the details of the trial. So even if it's a trial that might have 6 or 7 sites where it's enrolling patients, there might only be 2 or 3 docs that are really deep in the details and know every aspect of the trial. Meanwhile, and so what happens is they are in charge of recruiting and making sure that they're capturing patients, anybody who wants to enroll at any one of those sites. But that doesn't mean that your own doctor would have the expertise or knowledge about the particular trial. What's important, though, is that your doctor is open to you enrolling on a trial. Sometimes, and I think this is really important for patients to know, when you enroll on a trial, sometimes if your own doctor is not affiliated with the trial, right? Even if they're affiliated with the center, but they're not affiliated with the trial, you actually have to be seen by a doctor who's affiliated with the trial. Interesting. And so it means there might be a transition of care just while you're on the trial. So there are times, even I'm at the Fred Hutch and Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, where my patients will go on a trial that I'm not affiliated with. So they will actually see a trial physician during the time they're on the trial. And sometimes they'll still come back and see me just to maintain the relationship. And so we're still connected, but there's a little bit of a difference in terms of who their primary team is if they're getting an experimental therapy. What I would say to Natalia is that the first question is if the trials that you're seeing on the websites are active at your own clinic, in your own doctor's clinic. Because if they're not, that might be why they don't know. And if they are, then it might be that you have to do a little bit more advocacy and recognize that it might be that you have to transition temporarily to a different physician while you're on the trial, but it doesn't mean you have to leave your doctor behind if you like your doctor. Was that clear?
And I was just going to add a little bit and just say that it seems like, in my experience in working here at the Hutch, there are a lot of studies that are going on, and I don't know everything that's going on. So there is just so much information that's constantly being generated, and new grants and new studies that are being funded and kind of, rolled into action. And so it's entirely possible that they just may not necessarily know about the study. But if you bring back that information and you want to have a conversation with them about that, and I think that they should be more than willing to have that shared decision-making moment where you can say, hey, I was thinking about this, and, here's the information that I learned about the trial, and here's the reason why I'm interested. Here are some of the concerns that I have. What do you think about that? I think it's a great tool, a great kind of conversation point to have with your provider. Even if they don't know about it, they can definitely help you understand kind of the risks and the benefits that are associated with the study. Yeah.
But what about for some patients who say, like, I get what Natalia's asking, but if you have a patient who doesn't know where to start, don't you think sometimes the providers or the clinicians should be like, okay, well, you keep asking me, how come I don't know about clinical trials? So maybe I'd ask one of my colleagues if they know, or, why don't we sit down and look at it together? Because I know for me, if I keep asking you and you keep shutting the door on me, I'm going to be like, okay, well, like, what am I supposed to do here? I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. And for some people going on that website, because I've been on there a couple of times too, it is a lot of information.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's why I was thinking, like, is that a fair expectation for your doctor, or is there somebody else people should be talking to when they want to learn about clinical trials? Should we expect our doctor to share that information?
So this is what I also offer, is that if you're not at a place that's a NCI cancer center, we'll have patients come and their whole second opinion appointment is to talk and discuss clinical trials, all that they might be eligible for, the pros and cons and all of that. So I agree that I think it's a lot for the patient to have to be able to screen and then say, this is the one I want. But and maybe for Natalia, one thing to consider is that you can actually have a second opinion that's just about clinical trials at a research center. So you could go to the Hutch, you could go to there's a lot of comprehensive cancer centers, and every single day we'll have patients who are coming from sometimes far away for a full in in-depth 1 hour long visit where that we are discussing what clinical trials might be open for them, where those things are open, where they could go, the pros and cons. So it's not a visit where they're planning to transition care, but it's like exactly what you all said, that information visit just to try to distill. I think those are best done at the specialized cancer centers, but that's another option if it feels overwhelming.
That is awesome information.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of these cancer centers have actual patient, like clinical studies resource center, like pages on their website. And I was just kind of taking a look at that as well. There's actually contact information of people that you can talk to. So maybe if you can't actually physically go to the center, that you could give them a call and have a conversation and just start to say, hey, this is what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you think? You know, here's where I live. Here are my, you know, here's kind of my situation. And just to start having that conversation. Because I think, you know, once you start having these conversations, that's when all the doors start to open. But I totally understand what you're saying. Like, you know, what's the balance between how much, you know, advocacy you need to be doing versus how well informed your provider needs to be. And, you know, I think it's a dance, honestly. And there are some resources online that you can actually take a look at with respect to like the Fred Hutch and the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. And I keep plugging that because those are the institutions that I'm familiar with. But again, you know, there are other cancer centers across the nation that have similar resources as well, and individuals who can talk to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have two questions. Natalia is asking, is insurance a barrier for a second opinion at a research center? And my second question is, if someone participates in a clinical trial, can that information be used against them for health insurance or when trying to find another job?
So to answer your first question, it all depends on your insurance and then what the cancer center that you're going to go to for the second opinion, what insurance they accept. So for example, most insurances will you have the ability to have a certain number of second opinions, even if they're out of your network. So these are things that you should start with your own insurance and say, what is my availability in and out of network for a second opinion for that specific reason. And then from there, they can tell you, these are all the places that you could go. And then you can find the research center in those places. In terms of your question, Jasmine, any information from you on a clinical trial is protected as part of your protected health record.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is protected in the same way as if you were not on the trial. So there's not a distinction between the trial data and the non-trial data in terms of it being protected health information for you. At the time that we report clinical trial results, all those results are completely stripped of any identifiers at all. So they'll have things like the age of a person, the race of a person, but there's no information about who they are.
That's awesome.
And the one other question, the last question that we have is, what are certain things that I as a patient should look for in a clinical trial?
So
what's a generalized type of, what's generalized?
Yeah. So I think that if I would always ask, if I was a patient, if somebody's discussing this is the standard treatment, I would always ask, are there any trials right now testing this against a new treatment or any, because that indicates that there's progress being made in the field. So I would just ask that question. Like, I know this is standard, but what's being tested right now? That's in terms of active treatment. I think in terms of being through active treatment or around that time, it is more personal. I think it's why I'm struggling a little bit to answer the question, because it has to do with what you're kind of looking for. Like you said, the survivorship, the quality of life piece. If somebody's coming to you and saying, hey, I think that you would be good for a trial, this is what I would say. I would say, why do you think I am good for this trial? So you understand, what is it about you that is a match, right? And then I would ask, why is it a trial? Like, what is the study question that they're trying to answer? So then you understand like what you're doing in the trial, right? Are Are they trying to understand the dose of a drug? Are they trying to test a whole new one? All those things. And then from there, when they answer your questions, you'll be able to, I think, understand a little better, okay, seems like something for you or not. I think the third question, especially for our community, is what does this mean in terms of number of visits? And are there any costs to me because of the trial? Because a lot of times researchers don't talk about the fact that even though the trial drug is paid for, and for example, like maybe scans might be paid for, if you're coming 3 times as often as you were and you have to do a copay every time, they should have funding in place that takes care of that, so you don't have to pay more money just because you're on a trial. So I would definitely ask that question too.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or just like even like parking or anything.
Yes.
Parking, 15 minutes. Yeah.
I went to Mayo Clinic for the first time the other day, and my mom went with me, and they were like, "We have to pay for parking." Oh my gosh, did not know. Cash only. So
yeah.
And even kind of getting clarity on like what are the expectations around what is it that you have to do? Like how long is the study going to be? Sometimes these trials are not necessarily just taking a pill. Maybe it's like some kind of a lifestyle. Like what is the actual intervention? What are they wanting me to do? How is that going to impact, my life? Is this really different from what I usually do? Or, am I willing to kind of make that level of a change? Some of those I think it's kind of similar to some of the questions that came up in Dr. C's discussion earlier about some of these questions that you ask yourself can be kind of personal and really for you to decide as to whether that's a good match for you or not.
Right.
Yeah. And just one last thing is that you can always, if you are not comfortable or if things are not going well, you can always disenroll from a trial.
Absolutely.
So the patient always is 100% in control. You don't have to even say why. So whatever, if for whatever reason it's not going well or you just get uncomfortable, you always can disenroll.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is great. That's a great point. And so I have one more question. Marissa, did family history have anything to do with why you were open to participating in clinical trials?
A little bit, yes. I have a genetic mutation that's called Lynch syndrome. That's kind of how me and Dr. Dahl actually connected a little bit, about a year ago. That predisposes me to endometrial cancer, uterine cancer, colon cancer is a big one. I'm pretty sure it probably is what predisposed me to also breast cancer as well, but that's a whole another topic. But so yes, having that genetic mutation definitely did make me want to get out there and be like, okay, well, can we study these type of things? Can we figure out why? It seems like there is a lot of, African-American people that are coming down with this genetic mutation. And I remember even going online and just searching and looking it up and seeing what kind of trials were out there, or what type of research they were doing to see if that could possibly connect my breast cancer to that, or if there's any additional testing that I needed to have done, because I think I was 30 when I found out, about 28 or 30 when I found out that I had it. And so just making sure my doctors were on top of it. But knowing that I had that history, or even just a family history of cancer, it did make me want to go into doing more type of clinical trials and research. And, just hopefully, because I have a son. So, I want to make sure that when he becomes older too, that he has those options available to him as well.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if we have any other viewer questions for clinical trials or medical research. If anybody wants to chime in real quick.
There's we prepared so many questions. There are so many that we did not get a chance to get to. Some that were kind of answered during discussion. But again, if there's anything that's lingering, please leave a comment or email us at hello@breastofus.com, and we will do our best to get you answers. Thank you so much, Dr. Dole and Dr. Barrington.
Thank you.
I learned a lot still. So we really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to us and to talk to all of our baddies.
Oh my God. Thank you all so much. I am so impressed. And you are like my goals. What you've done so quickly with this community has just been amazing. And I thank you so much. I know you're helping so many people and I am a complete fan. So thank you so much for having me too.
Thank
you so much. This is amazing. This is amazing. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you for taking the time, ladies. You have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.